Today on Canadian Tech Podcast, we are speaking with Danish Yusuf, founder of Zensurance. Learn what it's like to build a software company in a highly regulated, conservative industry and what it means to raise funding for your startup. I wanted to start off with your inspiration for founding Zensurance. General liability insurance. This sort of product has been around for a really, really long time. I should start off and say I'm a customer.
Oh, I didn't know that. Thank you.
So, just before anybody comes back and is like, "Wow, this guy knows a lot," I know a little bit only because I'm actually a customer through my small business. So, thanks for making that process fairly easy. That was great. So that'll take me, I guess, to my first question of what was the founding inspiration for creating Zensurance?
Sure. I was a consultant in a prior life, and I did a lot of work with various financial institutions, banks, insurance companies, etc. And there was always that feeling that the forgotten middle. There's a lot of focus on consumers and a lot of focus on enterprise, but small business was generally too challenging to tackle, because they're so varied, their needs are different, they're spread all over the place, it's hard to get them in the masses. And it's expensive to serve. And my thought was, these people, business owners, really need that advice and support. And they're a forgotten segment. I figured, with my technology background, there's a way to address this need in a scalable manner. So I quit my job, this was late 2015, and I'd already started tinkering with this. And I quit my job at the end of 2015. I got married that same holiday break. And I came back fresh on the leap day, Feb 29, 2016, as my first full-time day, thinking, I want to help solve the problem for these small business owners, of which I had just become one.
Okay. Where did that insight come from? I know you've got a history of working at McKinsey and I think IBM. You went to Harvard Business School. Was it your interactions with small and medium-sized businesses at one of those companies?
Most of it came from interacting with large insurance companies. And when I sat in the management meetings, the board meetings, the conversation was almost always focused on home and auto insurance. Highly regulated, a lot of claims, big markets, so the discussions were always there. But when I peeled apart the financials, I looked at the small business segment, I said, this could be very profitable, but it's ignored. It's ignored on the delivery side as well as the supply side. So I said, this is an ignored segment. I think I can solve the problem. And in fact, within my time at McKinsey, I had an internal budget to create prototypes to try and pitch the solution to clients of McKinsey's.
Okay.
And in working with that internal budget and doing surveys and talking to people, I said, this is a real opportunity that I think I would be more excited about doing outside rather than inside. And that triggered the exit.
Cool. Okay. Well, good for you. A lot of the best business ideas come from, identifying this exact opportunity. It's not being served. I went through this process late summer 2020 of signing on a client who required me to have a couple $1 million in general liability insurance, business insurance, and I had heard about Zensurance before, probably through Mobile Syrup or Beta Kit or something like that. But I also went through, a lot of local business suppliers, business insurance suppliers to see, given the fact that I probably can't go to the office and I definitely don't want to go right now, even if I could, who's going to give me the easiest process and ideally a mostly digital process. And so, Zensurance obviously came up in my searches and here we are as ComCom, my business being a business insurance client and me going through this exact thing of like, who do I get business insurance from? What are the rates? What's going to get covered? And at the end of the day, I think we'll discover this. The end result is Zensurance's process was the easiest. I didn't have to fill out a PDF and send it back, which somebody asked me to do. I'm like, I'm not doing
Yeah.
this. Like, I'm not filling out a PDF and sending it back to you. This is ridiculous.
Right.
On kind of that vein of having gone through this process, I used to sell life, critical illness, and disability insurance products, so I know a little bit about how those are underwritten. There's actuaries working in the background to figure out all the risk and therefore how much to charge and all that fun stuff, or how much they need to cover their butts should a claim come through. So Zensurance takes an algorithm-based approach to assessing business insurance. Can you explain why that's novel compared to other business insurance providers?
It's a great question, and it's quite telling that you even have to ask that. You'd expect that at this time it'd be machines doing it, much like you buy travel, you buy anything. There's machines behind it, but almost every policy, business insurance policy in Canada, is priced by hand. So you'd mentioned you had to fill in a PDF. So you fill in the PDF, you email it to your broker. That broker then emails it to multiple insurance companies.
Mm-hmm.
At those insurance companies, you'll have multiple people reading that PDF and then typing it into either an Excel sheet or something else, fiddling with knobs and tubes and ups and downs, and then spitting out another PDF summarizing the price and sending it back to you. That's how 99.9% of commercial insurance policies are sold in Canada, and in fact, many parts of the world. For us, we think, that's crazy. It's 2021. Why? I think machines will do a far better job of that. So I describe it as novel, but it's only novel in insurance. It's not novel across other industries. Where you go to our website, it's an adaptive set of questions. So depending on the answer to the previous questions, we'll ask you an additional set of questions. Mm-hmm. And we looked at it. We have about 40,000 different questions we could ask you, just given the complexity of what a business could be doing. Wow. And it spits out a price. We have a bunch of different prices in the back. We work with 50 different insurance companies. We even have in-house brands where we've specifically tailored it to gaps in the market. Most of the time, it'll be a mid-sized business insurance policy that is just tweaked to make it work for small businesses. We've built our own in-house policies that are specifically built to service one-person shops or five-person shops. And so not only is the process better, the product is more tailored, and because it's more tailored, we think the price is more competitive because we've taken the stuff we don't think you need, added the stuff you probably do need, and then made it available to you.
Yeah, I definitely had a hard time figuring out, like, where do I put in a blockchain community management consulting firm? Practically a brand new type of company that's probably 4 years old, so and in Canada, right, maybe even less. So yeah, the 40,000 questions, that's just an impressive number. I don't know how many of those are variants on other questions, and just tailored very, very specifically to like a restaurant, a small restaurant, or a food truck, which is a fairly new business model, or this permanent, I run my business out of my home. I might have contractors around the world, but everything's based in Canada, but kind of not really like that. There's all sorts of different situations now that you can run into in 2021, especially that you just couldn't do or wouldn't run into in 2015. It's great that a Canadian company has taken this on, and it was novel, at least at the time. Maybe it still is. So kudos to you. I know enough to know that there is, often rightfully so, not specifically in your industry, but just in general, a lot of criticism directed at algorithms because of bias introduced via data sources, the developers of those algorithms, other things. So what kinds of things has Zensurance done, or are you doing in order to avoid that sort of bias from creeping in? And sure. An analogy, not directly specifically applied to Zensurance, would be like, a lot of databases for training facial recognition learning models are predominantly white people, and that's obviously a problem. It's creeped up in the past. So again, we're talking about insurance here, but what sort of things
Yes.
does insurance do to avoid that kind of bias from coming in?
Sure. No, it's a very important question. Um, I think there's a lot of biases even without machines being involved,
Hmm.
and so just by introducing a machine, what you have to think about is the intentional and the unintentional biases, and you solve problems through machines as well. For example, you ask many brokers out there that deal with personal insurance. We don't, but if you do car insurance, depending on the name of the city that the application is coming from, they may not want to write the business.
Yeah.
And although there's legal requirements for them to have to, they might take longer to do it. They might send a paper application rather than a more simple solution. So biases exist today in the manual process. Um, so recognizing that, we in our technology solution, I think more of those biases end up coming when you have AI and the machine is deciding on its own, like that image processing example you gave. The
Hmm.
pictures were given, they happened to be a skewed set, and then the machine just inferred a bunch of things from it. We're not yet at the point of releasing into the live our AI models. We have them in the back end, they're learning, they're training, but we haven't released them in the wild. However, what we have done, even to begin with, is our system has the two parts. One's where the data is, and one is what the AI and the algorithms that are using the data. We don't transmit any personally identifiable information from one side to the other. So name, email address, anything else like that is not given to the algorithm. It's just
Cool.
the description of the business. The address is there because the address does impact rating.
Sure.
If you live near a hydrant, less risky than if you don't live near a hydrant. So there's reasons why the address is needed. But there are some things that we've from now separated. And when we get to the machine learning side being more live, we'll have to definitely keep an eye on making sure we don't introduce biases, but in fact reduce the biases that already exist in the manual world.
Yeah. Like, sadly, there are places where your name alone might set
Yeah,
off some alarm bells, or my last name at the very least might set off some bias,
sure.
bells, or in somebody's head. So I totally get, the hydrant. That's just important for fire at the very least. And but I guess if you're then the parameters that you're using to assess that data obviously come into play.
Right. No, it's true if you use third-party data, and there's a bias in that data that could impact your decision. If your algorithms are designed such that it says if city equals X, charge 30% more, that's
Hmm.
an intentional bias. I think that's much easier to catch. It's the unintentional biases that are harder to catch, that you have to plan for ahead of time to make sure you're not unintentionally doing things that you don't want to.
Cool, that makes sense. How satisfied are you so far with how far Zensurance has come since its founding? Like, are you happy with the results and the growth so far? Are you, do you wish you were bigger, or maybe even smaller, because obviously different problems can come with scale too?
Right. I'm really excited about where we've gotten to. I never thought it would take this long. We've been around about 5 years, and if someone told me that it would take 5 years to get to where we are today, I may never have started. The industry it's just so hard to make change in such an old established industry, and so many conversations. Every conversation takes a couple of months to turn around. So it's been 5 years. We hit some major milestones this quarter in terms of people hired, customers written, policies issued, massive milestones this quarter, and every month has been better than the prior month. And post-COVID, the growth has skyrocketed, both in terms of headcount, insurance companies onboarded, products offered, dollars of revenue. Everything has set new records for us. So I'm really excited about where we are, and even more excited about where I think we'll be in 2 years from now. Just given we're now finally hitting that stride where we have so many insurance companies on the platform, we've automated many of the steps, that it's the time now in a couple of months to really pour gasoline on the fire and take this growth forward.
That's exactly where I wanted to head next. Like, what is next? Maybe without giving any potential competitors too much of an advantage. What's
Sure.
next for Zensurance? Like, where do you want to be in 2 years?
Our core focus right now is small business insurance, and we want to really own that space. There will always be room for multiple competitors. There's always going to be room for people to do it the traditional way because customers want different types of experiences. So it's not a one size fit all. It's not a winner take all market here. There's lots of room for lots of people, but we want to own that small business space. My sign that we are well along our way on that journey is every couple of weeks we get an email from another insurance broker saying, I have this customer, they've mentioned your name to us, we know that you're going to win the business, so here you go, take it. We know you're better, you're faster, you're cheaper, everything is easier, so here you go. And that happens every week or two. And I take that as a positive sign. We thank them. We're not rubbing it in their face. We thank them. In some cases, we have reciprocal arrangements. But that's a sign for me that, hey, we are really owning this space. That's level one for us. Level two, it depends, and this is next year onwards. It depends on where we see the most opportunity. Many people ask if they can license our software. Some people license if they can ask if they can license the insurance products that we have. Some people ask if we want to go into a different geography, or if we want to get into home and auto insurance, or if we want to refer life insurance. Lots of options are out there. We do that evaluation every 6 months to see what's next for us. So we'll tackle some of those, but we won't know which ones until later in the year when we run our biannual analysis as to what's next.
Cool. That sounds really interesting. If I could plug something for you that's completely self-interested,
Sure.
motorcycle insurance, and I guess it would be plane insurance. I don't have a plane yet. I do want to be a pilot, get my
Okay.
private pilot license, hopefully have a little six-seater to myself, I don't know, sometime in the next 6 years or so. If
Wow.
things, if my own personal, aspirations work out, obviously. So if you could get all that sorted out by 2025, 2026, that'd be great.
Maybe I'll have a plane of my own by then.
Maybe, yeah, why not? Um, as here's another highly regulated industry, flights, airlines, and planes, and everything else that goes along with that. As a Canadian company, I was curious about what benefits you feel like Zensurance has had operating in Canada. Maybe not in contrast to the US because things are relatively similar, but maybe in contrast to a developing nation, or maybe even somewhere in Europe. And conversely, is there anything that's holding Zensurance back, being a Canadian business?
So I grew up in Toronto, so it was natural for me to continue living here to start the company. A big benefit was my network. Frankly, that was the big reason for me starting the company here. Was my network was here. I had investor friends. I had insurance company networks, so I could get the company going. There was another big aspect of talent availability. It's changed during COVID, but there's a lot of smart people that were looking for local jobs. And we did not have a hard time in the early days attracting and retaining fantastic talent.
Yeah.
Huge benefit. We're based in downtown Toronto, and this is where everybody wanted to be. We had some good name investors. We had a lot of partners, a lot of growth. So the talent side was a huge benefit of being in Toronto specifically. The challenge I found with Canada, I can't speak to many other countries. I have lived in the US, so I have some experience back and forth. I found that our insurance partners here were more conservative than the insurance partners that my peer companies in the US were dealing with. They were more willing to take risks in the US, more open to trying new things. And in fact, our big investor is a US-based insurance company. And we didn't get that same level of support from local insurance companies. Even though we spoke to many of them, the feeling was we don't know whether online is the right thing yet. We're willing to support you in some ways, but not willing to write big checks.
Right.
So I think that was quite different. And also on the consumer side, it does feel like consumers in the U.S., particularly in the Valley and California and New York, are more open to doing new things than people here. It took longer for us to get established here than, again, my peer companies in the U.S. that were doing very similar things. They were able to scale much faster. Might be something to do with me versus the founder of those other companies as well. That's absolutely a possibility. My biased view is, hey, there's something in the market that people are a little bit more conservative here.
Sure. I think that's generally fair to say. Whether it's good or bad, you can probably debate that until the cows come home. But I think especially if you live in the Silicon Valley area, San Jose, Cupertino, San Francisco, you might not enjoy it, but you're rather used to change, and you've got all sorts of people around you who are constantly introducing you to new things, depending on the circles you run in. On the other hand, you might be one of these people who has been, effectively priced out of your home, especially if you're renting, and obviously you might be far more adverse to change as a result, because you see it's had a negative impact on your life. But on the other hand, technology can always be good or used for good or for bad, and so I would say largely, I can't, off the top of my head, I can't see any downsides. I would say this has been one that's been dramatically for the good. You're employing a lot of people. I guess you're fighting now Google, Facebook, Microsoft more so than you were 5 years ago for talent in Southwestern Ontario in general, not just in Toronto. Which I guess leads me to my next question. Like, you've grown exponentially. I think you're almost triple the headcount of what you were this time last year, roughly. Has all of that, and I'm not trying to demonize you in any way, regardless of the answer to this, I'm just curious, has all of that growth been in Canada? Has it all been in Ontario, or have you, maybe because of this increased competition, you've had to start to look elsewhere for some of that talent?
So growth in headcount you're talking about?
Yes, the individuals you guys fired.
Pre-COVID, all of our employees were around Toronto, commutable distance from the office, because we wanted people to come in most days. Post-COVID, we realized, actually, like many people, we realized the company can be run with people remotely. It was tough in the early days. We had to adapt many things, but we realized we could be very productive. So now we have employees on the east coast of Canada, on the west coast of Canada, and everywhere in between. Most still happen to be broadly GTA and GTA adjacent, but we do have employees all over the country now.
Nice. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm used to that sort of environment. I've gone all the way from here to New Zealand, and people all in between. So I get up in the morning, somebody I report to in New Zealand is literally headed off to bed, so I've got to wait until my evening to chat with them. And then the people in Europe, they're already they're about to wrap up their day and go home, and we're trying to squeeze in meetings at some crazy time that everybody can kind of just deal with.
Right.
As opposed to that's a great time of day to have that meeting. Thankfully, 5 time zones, not that 5, maybe 5.5, is not that difficult to deal with. But do you have some of that collaboration happening from coast to coast, or is it mostly Toronto centric still, since you're in Toronto, HQ is in Toronto?
Right. We take advantage of the fact that we have people in different time zones. We've got customers all over Canada, and so those that are more customer facing, we try and match their hours with the customers in their part of the country. So we actually had always thought about trying to get shift work to service different hours. Now it's very natural. We have people in different parts of the country. We try and match their hours to their customers. The global insurance center is London. So we deal a lot with London, UK.
Okay.
And we try and also take advantage of the various time zones to see, are certain people better suited to dealing with London versus not. The challenge is anyone in BC working with someone in London. The time zone is so different that when they wake up, London is shutting down. So that's the one thing that's hard to manage. We have explored people in South America, employees on the engineering front. We looked at it. The time zone is great because it's either 1 or 2 hours different. It's not that depending on where you are. So we're open to it. We haven't actually done it yet, but we are very open to it.
You said you had to adapt some of your processes, maybe your technology, when people started working from home more often, if they were already working from home since then, and obviously you've expanded across the country now. What sorts of things were, maybe the biggest changes? Like were these IT changes where you need to start installing, your own VPN hardware, or was this, moving from on-premise software that you had internally to cloud-based software, whatever you want to call it? Like what were the biggest changes there?
There was a mindset, or there was a real realization for me that the insurance industry is even more backward than I thought. When I got my first job, I got a BlackBerry and I got a laptop, and off I went.
Nice.
Only when the pandemic hit that I realized most insurance shops still worked off of desktops and the old desk phone. And so we were fortunate. It was all laptops. Everyone has a laptop. Everything's in the cloud. There's nothing on premises. So on a Friday, we told everybody, take your stuff home. You're working from home next week. Technologically, that was it. All soft phone, everything in the cloud, no issues technologically. What we had to really adapt was how do people keep communicating? Yes, we had Slack, but how do you make sure people are actually talking? So we had to introduce new touch points. We did virtual workouts, virtual yoga, bingo, trivia nights, town halls, lots of pre-organized connections. We've done virtual, what do you call those, escape rooms for people. Cool. We now have someone dedicated to, all she does is manage culture and remote events, team by team. She'll go across, she has a budget, every team gets a virtual event every so often. They have a budget. We used Uber Eats gift cards for everybody to go and have lunch together virtually in their teams. A much more defined onboarding process, to the point where you join, it was actually a bit stressful because they got 50 calendar invites to have a coffee chat here, a lunch chat there, a virtual session here, a town hall there. We just pre-schedule 3 months worth of stuff, so you don't have to think about it. You just follow your calendar and you've now met everyone in the company. I've also just recently started a thing because we went from 50 employees to something like 130 in the last year. And I look at names and I say, who is this person? They're in my company, but I don't know who they are. Are they a real person? So I'm going through this exercise over the next 3 weeks. All people managers, I'm getting a one-on-one coffee chat with them, 30 minutes each. So that's 25 or 30 people. And then the following 3 weeks, one level down. And then the following 3 weeks, I want to try and cover everybody in the company. So over the next 3 months, I want to meet everyone again, just have that connection with people. So those are the types of things we've had to put in place to make sure people are connected, they're learning, they're excited, they're motivated. We have a course set up with UFT. All of our people managers will do people leadership training at UFT. With an aspect of that is remote leadership. So just training our people as well.
That sounds like a great course. I'm gonna have to go look it up. It's one I could definitely use. One last question for you. Around halfway through the conversation, you were talking about how other insurance companies here in Canada are willing to take less risk, or at least it seems like they're willing to take less risk than than similar American companies. And even to the extent that your American peers who are doing similar things to Zensurance had, I guess, an easier time fundraising. What is that process actually like? I think most people don't actually have a clue. I've got an arm's length view at that process every once in a while, but even for myself, I've never pitched a business to somebody who will hopefully cut me a check for a couple $1 million and let me run and start developing things. What is that process actually like?
Sure. I'd first start by saying there's a lot of luck involved. There's timing, there's serendipity. Our big investor, in our early days when we wanted to have a business relationship with them, we didn't get that far just talking through on the insurance side. Good conversation, but we didn't get too far. And then it just so happened that a friend of mine moved from one insurance company to this company. They were hosting an internal event. they asked me to come present, and initially I said, well, I don't know if I want to, because our business discussions didn't go anywhere. But he convinced me. I went, we talked, we had a panel discussion, and a few weeks later they called me saying, hey, we're interested in investing. And it was just absolute serendipity that I happened to be there, even though initially I may not have wanted to. But they had the conversation. I met all of the senior management, and I just really liked the people I interacted with, and all the way to the top. Had lots of great conversations. I probably met 50 people during that process. It took 9 months. But at the end of it, I was only looking for $500,000 to round out our seed extension round. But at the end of it, they cut us a check for much more than 10 times that. And it just came to a point where I really wanted to work with them. We had great conversations, and there was a lot of trust. So that was a luck. I would say there was a lot of luck in that. I think there's a few types of investors that I came across that I'd say you want to really watch out for. And there's a few types that you want to seek. Let me start with the positive ones, the ones you want to seek. You want to make sure you're working with people that believe in your vision and are investing because they want you to be the one running the business and not them behind the scenes controlling it.
Right.
That's really important, that understanding is there. Yes, it does help that if that investor comes from a brand name shop, because it's a signaling impact to others. But I think equally, if not more important, is the actual individual themselves. Is that somebody you can call in the middle of the night when you're in a panic and something's going wrong, and they're going to sit down with you and help you solve the problem? You don't want someone that's going to point fingers and just blame you for everything, but they're going to solve the problems for you. So right. Those are two things that I particularly look for. When I hire employees, I look for people that are strong opinions, but also humble, and I like that in the investors too. So we're going to learn from each other. The ones that I came across that I wasn't a huge fan of, one profile in particular, this would be someone that either they're a doctor, a lawyer, or somebody that made a whole bunch of money, and now they just want to cut checks, and they think they're a venture capitalist because they have a couple $1 million in the bank account. You right. really don't want that, because they don't know what they're doing, and they're going to possibly cause a headache. And sometimes it's the same profile, sometimes it's a little related. It's a overly banker type person where they're so focused on the financials and how profitable are you going to be, show me your model, let's go to the 15th tab on the third cell and tell me what that number means. The only thing that both sides should realize is that the model is wrong. No matter what it is, the model is wrong. Right. So you want someone that is there for the vision, they're willing to take the risk, and know that whatever the model says, it's wrong, so why spend so much time on it? You want to put through the thinking, you want to make sure you have thought through the process, but just work on moving forward and adapt as you go. And I spoke to 60, 70, 80 investors over time.
Wow.
The best was when it was a flat, firm, early no. I much prefer that to the maybe, but unfortunately most investors will say maybe. Mm-hmm. So you want to quickly get to an answer, a yes or a no. Most will be no. 80, 90% will be a no. Get those out of the way. Find the few that you want to work with. I had a monthly email that I sent to all of those that I'd like to work with in our early days. Sent updates on the numbers, the progress, the statistics, had quarterly meetings. And then when I was ready to raise, the frustrating thing, which I think many founders will say and agree with, is very few people wanted to be the first one to say yes. Many would say, I'm interested, but who else do you have? So you need some sort of a forcing mechanism to say, this is the date, these are the terms, who's in. It's a little bit risky because if you don't have firm terms and a firm date, you don't want to be bluffing, but you want to try and have some sort of a forcing mechanism to have people join and get the round closed with those people that you're interested in working with. So there's a science behind how do you manage investors, how do you triage them, how do you get to the subset that you're excited about, and then forcing the close at the end. And as soon as that closes, don't celebrate because you're starting to fundraise for your next round the very next day. So it's a never-ending cycle.
Sounds like campaigning for a Congress seat in the U.S. You just won, and then you just start
That's right.
fundraising for the next race because it's in 2 years.
It never ends. It never. And as a founder, you have to enjoy the fundraising aspect of it, or you have to tell yourself you enjoy it because it's never ending.
I'm not sure how I feel about that. I'm not building any tech. I run a services-based business, but I've been incredibly fortunate to have just kind of jumped in with a client a little over 3 years ago now, and everything was fine. It is a one-man show, and another opportunity just kind of happened, and then I had two clients, and
Right.
then COVID hit, and oh my God, things just took off. Like it was absolutely nuts, and I don't know why. It was complete correlation. It's definitely not causation, but yeah, it's that's worked great for me. Obviously, very few people have an ability to just spend a couple $100,000 hiring other people to help build something as potentially complicated as Zensurance or a clubhouse or something like that, where there's all sorts of stuff in the background that just kind of works and you don't see
Right.
it. And yet, like you talked about, trying to eliminate bias from machine learning models and actually applying an AI, like the person hours that go into actually building that up and testing it and all that, nobody gets to see. And so everything
true.
looks like an overnight success story
Yes.
until you get Danish on Canadian Tech Podcast and really have him explain even just a very small part of that process of building a business and getting money
Right.
to hire more people, get more resources, give yourself more runway and more time to keep building.
That's so true. You can look at our website, and many people critique us. Incumbents will critique us and say, "Oh, it's just a fancy website." And then sometimes you'll have people that pop up with a very nice looking website, and I say, "Great, if that's all you want to copy, go for it, because that's only what you see on our website is 5% of the effort.
Yeah.
There's 95% of my sleepless nights, not just mine, all of our management, the effort, the dollars that go into this. 95% of it just works behind the scenes." And it makes the website look simple, but there's so much behind the scenes.
Yeah, no, I can appreciate that, and hopefully, as more people listen to conversations like this, they'll start to appreciate that too. I want to end off on this question here, if you don't mind. Your that fundraising story of you doing that presentation for that insurance company. They shall remain nameless. That's perfectly fine. I'm curious, did you get a sense from them of this was something they wanted to do and maybe just couldn't justify doing it themselves? Or was it just like nobody at the company had ever thought to do this before? And here's this guy who's already like halfway there. We can just pump a little bit of money into his idea and benefit from it, probably being a policy seller. You're selling their policies as well through the platform. Like, did you get a sense of why they hadn't done it themselves, or why they saw this opportunity through you and Zensurance as like, we got to do this?
Yeah. So I'll be the first to say what we're doing is not very novel, right? Selling stuff online has been around since the 90s. Right? Pets.com was selling stuff online in the late 90s.
Yeah.
It's the application of it to insurance and everything that goes behind it is the part that's difficult. And so it's definitely not the case that they didn't think about it. They definitely thought about it. In fact, they had acquired outright a company like ours, but in the UK, a year or two prior. So they knew the model and they understood it. They could very well have taken that company, brought it to Canada, and done it themselves because they had that expertise. I think what was interesting here was just the connection we had. They saw the passion that I had to make this succeed. We had progressed we were only 2 years old at the time. We had progressed, we had insurance company contracts, we had traction, customers, we had a brand. So it was just the ability to speed things up rather than starting from scratch. And for a big company, what's a few $1 million, right? It's not a big deal. If it means gaining 2 years, that's worth a lot more. And if you get a strong team, and we were only 10 people at the time, a strong, motivated team, it's worth quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I say that being one of the people that I'm saying was worth quite a bit. I realize that.
I was going to say, if you think you've got the 10 best people working on it already, I mean, theoretically, they could have gone for an acqui-hire, right, and done kind of the
Right.
same thing. Like, we're going to acquire Zensurance and make it part of,
Right.
just throwing names out there, make it part of RBC or whatever, or
Right.
TD, or Manulife or what have you. But, it's probably the thing you mentioned earlier of like, we believe in this founder. We think he's the right guy to take this across the finish line, whatever that looks like.
Right.
And obviously, hand you the money with all sorts of terms, of course,
Yes.
and have you keep building the thing that you're building, as opposed to applying the UK brand, having to form all these relationships themselves, to bring it over to Canada, because highly regulated industry, very little crossover unless you're an underwriter of all the underwriters, like Munich
Right.
Re or something like that. And yeah, no, that's terrific. That's an amazing story. Danish, I think we're really good here. Thanks so much for your time on this afternoon, and hopefully hopefully you can stay safe and ideally stay somewhat free during this time period that we're just about to head back into. Yeah, thanks so much
Yeah.
for your time, and for spending some time with us here on Canadian Tech Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to Canadian Tech Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a 5-star rating on iTunes or your favorite podcast app, or like the video and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. In the meantime, have fun.